Record. Damn you, Gert. And also, it looks like my volume's really low on this. Okay. All right, so the scrotum and contents. So I know a lot of you follow along in the book, and let's see. They went with the exam before they went with the anatomy. So you know what, I didn't write pages down, but basically I'm going to talk about the exam and the protocols after we talk about anatomy. Actually here. Technical considerations, protocol, procedure, normal anatomy. So I'm basically starting in 514, more or less going in order here. And then when we get to 522, they start to talk about pathology. Then I'll jump back to the protocol, and you might not even want to follow along in the protocol because mine's different, and I didn't actually like the books. I started reading it, and I was like, this is stupid, and I'm do my own. I think my protocol is similar to most everyone else's, but of course, as always, you do what you do wherever you're at. But in any case, let's go along here. So I have images and I have a outline. I think we'll jump back and forth here. So between the outline and the images. All right. So we could start up high as we're leaving the pelvic cavity. We go the testicles are held by the spermatic cord, and of course in that we have to have a blood supply though. So there's arteries, veins. This is not going to work. More over here. Arteries, veins, nerves. Let's see, lymphatics. Well, lymphatics are really important for all the other reasons that lymphatics are important, but they actually drain the scrotal sac of fluid. Otherwise, if you had a lymphatic issue, the scrotum itself would slowly fill with fluid and probably wouldn't stop. And of course, we have to get sperm through there in the vas deferens, the tube that takes sperm from the testicles and up. And you know what? I'm going to add something the book didn't have in here, muscle. Muscle as well. That is the, that's right, I did it backwards here. Chromatic? Of course, I didn't write it down. And I don't know how to spell. Well, I might have chromatic muscle. Idiot, Kurt. I'm an idiot. Well, in any case, a muscle does kind of surround this whole grouping here of arteries, veins, nerves, lymphatic, vas deferens. There is a muscle that surrounds that, and that is chromatic muscle. And let's just quickly, so we'll just quickly come over here and yeah, let's go ahead and do, so here if we circle that, that is the somatic cord carrying all of what we just mentioned, including the muscle. Then the next thing we're going to talk about is the epididymis. Now the epididymis is this little guy along the outside. Along the outside, and it has, so let's see, epidid, this, and then there's the, it has like so many things. It has a head, a body, and a tail. And we'll talk about more of the function of this in shortly. So the epididymis, head, body, and tail. Gosh, you know what? We're just going to label it right now. We'll talk about what it does shortly. So, oh, well, then the book goes straight into post-vasectomy changes. Okay, well, let's talk about it now. Let's actually move down one more picture, zoom in a little bit. Because in order to talk about the next subject the book gets into, which is post-vasectomy, in other words, snip, snip of the vas deferens, that's going to have some issues because the man is still producing sperm and fluid that goes along with the sperm. And if this is tied off, obviously that can cause problems and changes that we see. So just really quickly, sperm are created in these lobules here, here, and here, and here, all of those. They travel through this network into the basically the head of the epididymis, and then all of these come together, and you have one incredibly long and squiggly duct that comes all the way down and back and around. So if we block that off, you can imagine that cysts perhaps might form. So a cyst, a post-vasectomy cyst, is a spermatocele, and it literally is filled with, fluid, not really seminal fluid because that occurs later on. This is just kind of the fluid around the sperm itself, and old, dead sperms. Sperm cells. Now these guys can be hard to differentiate, pretty much impossible to differentiate from simple cysts, which also do occur in there. And by the way, when these cysts occur, we see them all the time, right about here or here, maybe down here. Lots and lots and lots, and then the head. Very few in the body or the tail, very few. In fact, I'm going to erase that one. Actually, I'm not even going to erase this one because they really happen up here high in the head. For whatever reason, that's where spermatoceles are most likely to be seen, and where those are not uncommon to see. The other thing we can see is ectasia of the reedy testis. And I added, your book didn't say this, but it makes perfect sense, and the epididymal ducts as well. Now you're like, what the hell is he talking about? Let's go look at that meaning. So ectasia, of course, means a dilation. Well, if you cut and sew off the vas deferens, which is the only way out, you're going to get dilation. The ready testi, let's see, I'm going to have a helper here. So, yeah, just got to make sure these are awfully small. Ready or reedy testis, well, that's where all of these tubules And by the way, I don't know if anyone else has had the pleasure of dissecting a pig testicle. I did it once and I almost passed out because you take the scalpel through. Yeah, you laugh back there. You take the scalpel through this layer, and then suddenly it explodes because of all of these tubules are in there very tightly packed and wound, and so it's really disturbing. I pretty much almost passed out when I saw that. But all these tubules come into the reedy testis, and that is this network here. So you have, there, all these all that little net of tubes is the reedy testis, and that can become ectatic, can be ectatic, large. And then we go through these tubules. We'll talk about those in a second. And then in my opinion, and it's not really opinion, it's the truth. Oh, actually, no, I looked it up. You could see ectasia over here as well in the actual head and body and tail of this guy, because it's all one big tubular network. And if you're cutting off over here, now this tube doesn't become ectatic because it's already larger, but these over here can become ectatic. Okay, so I honestly kind of disagree with the book talking about post-vasectomy changes when we haven't even finished with the anatomy. But I'm trying to stay with it. So if that's what they want to do, that's what they do. So we can see cysts, spermatoceles post-vasectomy, snip snip. We could see ectasia of the reedy testis and epididymis. And then we could see granulomas. And so this is just another reaction. In fact, I'll call it a reactionary solid tumor. The body doesn't like having these old dead sperm cells building up, and so sometimes it reacts and actually creates a solid tumor around it. So here, let's put this in its own little package here, because that's just kind of an add in. Now we're back to actual anatomy. I mentioned these highly wound tubes. In fact, what do we say? Epididymis. Yeah, how do we get past? Oh. All right, that's when you got to go back and look at your notes, Kurt. That's what I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Let's just make a little more room. Hopefully you have it on your page. I was thinking I was just going to name them head, body, and tail, but no, I do have a little bit of information, mostly just what they look like. Head, well, actually on a sagittal picture, it's going to look a little bit like a triangle. It's kind of weird. Looks like that. But yeah, you don't have to write that down. Let's see, AP diameter on the head, 10 to 12 millimeters. They could have put 1.2 centimeters, I guess, because 10 millimeters is a centimeter. And that's kind of an AP diameter, anterior, posterior diameter. It should be homogeneous. I'm too close. Homogeneous. Either isoechoic to slightly more echogenic. as compared to testicle. So we're talking about the echogenicity of the epididymis here is compared to the testicle. Always has to compare it to something. Body, a little bit smaller, 2 to 4 millimeters. AP, that too is, oof, homogeneous, except this one, isoechoic to slightly hypoechoic. Iso is slightly hypoechoic. And the same thing with the tail, except the tail, what do they say, 2 to 5. And really the same thing, homogeneous, isoechoic to slightly hypoechoic on the tail. Okay, sorry about that. So let's just quickly. Well, we have some ultrasound images that we'll look at shortly, but let's stick with our drawings for now. So the seminiferous tubules, those are the guys. That's where sperm is made. So here is spermatogenesis, and it's a, boy, you know, I should have grabbed a picture of what it looks like. They have, you know what, let's just kind of draw. I can do it by memory. I've seen it in a while, but so let's say we have a seminiferous tubule here, and of course it's surrounded by epithelial cells there, and oh, maybe I should draw you. I should have had a picture, because what happens is like a conveyor belt. The sperm cells begin back here and they migrate. They migrate through until it really, so they're actually not square, they're going to be circle, because that's what, you know, that's what the head looks like, of course. Let's just draw some circles in here. And then they come through and bam, set me free, set me free. And this happens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Just sperm cells like a conveyor belt being created. They start back here, maybe five rows deep, and they just keep coming through. In between these cells and in between the tubes, there's going to be some other cells. And let's just kind of, these are kind of like they're an interstitial, they're interstitial cells, meaning they're kind of cells that are in between other cells, all the other, you know, the tubules and all that. So but there are some more, because remember, the testis does two things. It produces sperm and creates testosterone. So these cells are called the cells of Leydig, cells of Leydig. That should be in capital because that's a person's name. Cells of Leydig, and they produce testosterone. Oh, I forgot I had it written down here. So seminiferous tubules, spermatogenesis, cells of Leydig, testosterone. And the book drops into development. Now this one I could understand a little bit better. So we're not out of anatomy, but we're going to talk a little bit about development. And it kind of makes sense because there are some very common developmental errors. Yeah, I don't know. I still wouldn't have put it in here, but development. Let's see. And they actually start out retroperitoneal. So as you guys know, both men and women, the gonads start in the abdomen, actually fairly high up in the abdomen. And they develop they start on the posterior wall behind the peritoneum. Peritoneum, behind the peritoneal cavity. But as you guys remember, no organ just suddenly just pops up inside the peritoneal cavity. All of our organs, all of our peritoneal organs actually start on the posterior wall, and then some of them stay back there, like the pretty much the entire pancreas stays in the retroperitoneal space. But all the other organs, they grow out and they push out into the cavity, and of course the visceral peritoneum surrounds those organs, and that's essentially what happens with the testicle. They start on the posterior wall, but then they push into the peritoneum, so they become a peritoneal organ, but then they continue to travel. Let's see, retroperitoneum grows in the peritoneum. Following becoming intraperitoneal. I guess I left myself a lot of room. They start posterior, behind, they become peritoneal, and they follow a track of cells, which has got to be the funniest word we're going to see in a little while. I always say gubernaculum, but it's probably like gubernaculum. But I prefer gubernaculum, but it just sounds silly. Now I better say gubernaculum. Otherwise, you guys are going to go out and say gubernaculum, and people are going to laugh at you. But no one's ever going to ask you, because no one even knows what this is, except for anatomists and students, and then you'll forget it by next week. Anyway, cylindrical structure. I'm just going to say structure. That attaches to, once again, I am too close, too far, okay. That attaches to caudal. Remember, that's kind of the rear end, the bottom end, the inferior end. Caudal end of, you know what, I'm just going to say gonad, because both men and women develop this. It pulls the ovaries down, and it just pulls the testicles down and down and down and down until they're outside the body. But both men and women have this. In fact, here, let's just do this. Male. Guides testis into the scrotum in the 8th month. So most of the time, certainly not all the time, most of the time, by 8th month gestation, testis in scrotum. And then those that aren't, most of them within the first few weeks of life, they will descend. One or both of them will descend. If they don't descend, it's really, really bad news. So that's something your doctor always, or your baby's doctor always checks on. The remnant of the gubernaculum becomes a remnant scrotal ligament. So at the, let's just draw a little testicle here. And we rarely ever see this, but it could be like just like a little tiny ligament at the caudal end. Remember, this is same as the rest of the body. This is superior, this is inferior, so at the caudal end. And you might find a little couple of strings hanging all the way down to the Scrotum. So in a normal, healthy individual, you will not see this because there won't be fluid. Just like in the abdomen, we don't see, gosh, we don't see a lot of the things that we talked about, especially with the peritoneum and the ligaments and everything, unless there's ascites. Now, the ascites in the testicle called, yeah, if there's fluid in the scrotum, then we can see this as well, just like in the abdomen. We see structures we normally wouldn't see when there's fluid in the abdomen. Hydrocele, good grief, Kurt. Yeah, I'll just continue with the scrotum here like this. Scrotum, testicle, ligament. Okay. So as it's traveling, it's going from outside the body through what's called the inguinal canal. You know what? Let's stop here and look at some pictures. We talked about a few things. Let's come back and label a few things here. Seminiferous tubules right here, and here, and here, and here, and here. So each one of these lobes, in fact, let me just do this. There we go. Each one of those lobes is filled with 1 or 2 or 3 seminiferous tubules, highly coiled tubes under high pressure, as noted from my traumatic experience cutting a testicle open with a scalpel. Cells of Leydig are microscopic, but they're going to be in there as well. Here we'll just kind of do a dotted line connecting that. They're microscopic, so we can't see them, but that's where they are as well. Gubernaculum, okay, we're not going to see that. Process vaginalis, now that's, I guess I didn't have as many things to, didn't have as many things to label as I thought. The process vaginalis is basically, this is a part of the peritoneal cavity, and so it's a outpouching of the peritoneal cavity, and it's going to start going through the inguinal ligament. Ah, that's right, I mentioned inguinal ligament. Let's just show you something right here. This circled here, this is our whole spermatic cord. The canal, I think it was this line. It doesn't really matter. We'll just call it this line here. Is the actual inguinal canal. Now, normally women don't have, they have the ability to have this canal, but they usually don't, because nothing should be going outside of their body. But it is possible. It is actually possible to have a patent inguinal canal in a woman, and for some reason, I think the inguinal canal is called the same, but the space, it's called the nook, the space of nook or something, and it would go into the labia majora, but that's very rare, but possible. So the process vaginalis is a part of the peritoneal cavity. It's coming down. So the peritoneal cavity is up here, and this process kind of reaches down, and it starts to grow through the inguinal canal and down into the scrotum, and becomes the tunica vaginalis. Now we're calling it a different name, but it's the same thing. Tunica vaginalis is going to have 2 parts, well, just like the peritoneum. we have a visceral and a parietal peritoneum. And let's see, yep, a visceral and a parietal tunica vaginalis. And it is peritoneum. And that's important because now we have the potential of fluid, of fat or intestines of the peritoneal cavity sliding into the scrotum. So let's see, there's a visceral layer that is just like against, whoa, over anyway. Why can't I? All right, wow, wow, Kurt, you're just fucking losing it. All right, tunica vaginalis, visceral. That's adherent, adherent to testicle, and then the parietal is adherent to scrotum. So just like in the abdomen, visceral peritoneum surrounds the organs, parietal peritoneum surrounds the outside. Same thing with the tunica vaginalis. Now the tunica, did I say everything I wanted to? Yeah. Tunica albuginea, so albino, white, guinea, but basically the white tunic. Oh, well, in tunica vaginalis, to vaginate is to inward fold. I think is a decent way of saying that. Albuginea would be a white tunic, so that the inward folding tunic, and that's what's going on here, is that this is folding in and eventually coming all the way down and folding in there. So that's why it's tunica vaginalis. And then tunica albuginea is the capsule of testicle, and it happens to be stark white in color. It'll be stark echogenic white on our screen too, but that's not what it's called. It's called because it literally is white if you were to look at it. It invaginates at the hilum. So the tunica albuginea surrounds the testicle, but of course, just like all of our other organs, there's got to be a place where veins and arteries and lymphatics, and in this case, tubules, go in and out. So there's a hilum to the testicle. The capsule goes all the way around, surrounds the testicle, and then invaginates, in other words, kind of folds in at hilum, and to create a structure we see as the mediastinum. Let's see, we'll talk about the mediastinum and the rete, and then we'll go look at a picture. Well, we'll talk about these three, and then we'll look at a picture. So the mediastinum, that is kind of the main, let's see, structure. The structure, almost like the foundation. Ooh, I like that. I like that. You're all sitting in your homes, you're sitting on the foundation, or maybe you have a basement, but still the house is sitting on the foundation. That's what the mediastinum is to the testicle. And of course, in your house, you know, you're probably your electric and your plumbing and all that, that's coming in through the foundation as well. So yeah, it's a pretty decent analogy there. Structure, foundation, and is seen as a echogenic line. You know what? I'm going to add something here. Septa radiate out. So like if here's my echogenic line, the mediastinum. We're going to see something like that. And if you could see them, you usually don't, but the septa, like 2x4s in your walls holding up the whole testicle, are going to be going out like that. So the septa come all the way up to the tunica albuginea, which is on the outside, and they connect all the way down to the mediastinum, which is on the inside. And of course, it's really all the same thing. The tunica albuginea and the mediastinum are continuous. The reedy testis, that is, let's see, did I write? Mediastinum, structure for lymphatics, arteries, seminiferous tubules, apex of each lobule. You know what? I did have a couple of other things to say. So it's the apex of each lobule. So if you look at each one of these as a lobule, and it comes down, it's actually going to come down a little more like an upside down triangle here. The apex would be here down at the bottom, and the base of the triangle is up there. And of course, these guys are going up. The apex of each lobule comes to the mediastinum, and it holds the structure of the reedy. The reedy itself, these are just a bunch of tubes or tubules. Okay. So that these reedy testis accepts the tubules, formed by all the seminiferous tubules. Tubules are a network of tubes formed by all the seminiferous tubules, and it empties out into efferent ductals, tubules, ductals, whatever. The efferent ductals, those are, what did I say, 10 to 15? About 10 to 15 of them. And they go into the head of the epididymis. Okay, now let's come back and look at this picture here. You guys stop me at any time you need to. You need me to. Let's see, this one is our septa. Kind of like Cooper's ligaments. The septa, they go all the way from the, well, you see this more tissue, connective tissue here, that's going to be, let's see. Well, that's okay. I guess there's no real, I'm just going to draw my own line. The mediastinum. That's the connective tissue is the mediastinum. It is continuous with, oh, let's, here that one is. See, coming from here out, the tunica albuginea. You could see that this is the tunica albuginea. It is continuous with the septa. The septa come in, they are continuous with the mediastinum. So it's all one thing. Let's see. Oh, we mentioned, of course, the tunica. Well, let's talk about the reedy. Sorry, guys, I'm a little out of sorts today. We already mentioned the reedy testis, but those are coming in from the seminiferous tubules. Oh, we already did that, the seminiferous tubules. Sperm is going to be created in the seminiferous tubules. They are aimed towards the reedy testis. They start coming through, and they're going to start coming out these 10 to 15 tubes. Here's that indicator there. Those are the efferent ducts, or was it ductules? Ductules. Well, ducts, ductules. Does it really matter? It does not. The afferent ductules. And then you can see where the afferent ductules are going into the epididymal head. Now, I think it's a bit of an exaggeration to have it all the way down to here being head. I think that's a little bit too long, but perhaps not. Perhaps maybe I'm just wrong on that. But then now they become epididymis or epididymal duct, and I looked it up. I was wondering if it was like more than one duct in all this, and all the research I found was that no, it actually becomes one duct, just unbelievably long, spinning or swirling all the way, and then it becomes vas deferens on the way out. Down here we have a double arrow. You see how that is? It goes, or a double indicator, it goes from here and then also from here. Those are two layers of basically peritoneum. We're going to call it though the tunica vaginalis. I was going to think of the process vaginalis, no, the tunica vaginalis. Tunica vaginalis. And so let's see, we have this layer is indicated again right here. So that is the visceral layer of the tunica vaginalis. And I think, yeah, over here is where they indicated. They could have done it. They could have done it right here too. In fact, let's just do it right here. I think it's easier. Of the tunica, parietal layer of the tunica vaginalis. Let's see, let's come back. Go back to our outline, see where we're. So the process vaginalis is peritoneal cavity. It becomes the tunica vaginalis. It has a visceral and a parietal layer, just like in the abdomen. And just like so many organs in the abdomen, not all of them, but most of them have a connective tissue layer independent of the parietal layers and the visceral layers, an independent layer. This one has the tunica, the testicle has the tunica albuginea. It is the capsule of the testicle, happens to be white, invaginates at the hilum. So it goes around and then goes in. So it invaginates at the hilum. The mediastinum is that invagination. That's what we're seeing with the mediastinum, is the tunica albuginea coming into the organ itself. Mediastinum acts as a structure or foundation. It is an echogenic line seen inside the testicle. There are septa that radiate out from the mediastinum. They go all the way up back to the tunica albuginea, and they create lobes. That's right. I wanted to say how many lobes. So 2 to 400, I believe. Of course, my notes are particularly disastrous today, guys. I apologize for that. I, quite frankly, am surprised at how. All right, going from memory, 2 to 400. I'm sorry, 200 to 400 lobes. Each one of these has 1, 2, 3 seminiferous tubules inside of each lobe. Apex of each structure, the testis tubules formed by all. So as all the seminiferous tubules, they're creating sperm. The sperm travel down the tubules into the reedy testis. So all the tubules go into the reedy testis. From there, they empties into the efferent ducts. The efferent ducts, about 10 to 15 of them, they empty into the head of the epididymis. So like we said before, there's a head region, or this whole region's the head. Body goes all the way down to there. And then tail. God, that was a real mess, Kurt. Head, body, tail of the epididymis. That does. Let me go in that appendix, testis, appendix, epididymis, and testicular arteries. Okay, let's go to this picture. I know it's going to do a little bit of labeling. Now, I actually regret getting this picture because it was too much. There's too many layers. There's actually a couple more layers that you can actually see. I erased this line, and then this line over here, because it goes beyond the layers of tunica albuginea. The only ones we need to worry about are tunica albuginea, the visceral and parietal tunica vaginalis. This one also included 2 more fascia layers, the inferior and superior fascia layers. We don't have to worry about that. So anyway, if we're going to go by layers alone, we could call this testicle, or we could call that the tunica albuginea, and we'll just put testicle there. The next layer would be the visceral tunica vaginalis. I almost said parietal peritoneum, and visceral. And then let's see. Yeah, and then they had this one actually as the parietal layer. This guy was supposed to be basically the head of the epididymis here. Oh, and it has a little. It looks like they might have shown this little tiny nub hanging off of there. That's important for us to know about. We'll talk about that in just a second. So this is what we're going to call that head of epididymis. Veins form a plexus. We'll talk about that in just a second. In fact, let me just go ahead and name the veins. And this is actually called a piniform plexus, and those are the veins, piniform plexus. Our veins do this a lot, and I really don't fully understand why they form that plexus and not just, you know, one or two veins leaving the testicle. They have to form a net. And I believe piniform, I believe it means net-like in Latin. Very strange, but let's see. We have nerves and lymphatics. I don't know the difference of all these different ones, but you know, artery. We'll talk about the arteries in the second. Artery. I think that's a nerve. Another artery. Oh, the cremaster. Cremaster muscle. And this looks like character from South Park. Like, oh no, they just killed Kenny. That's actually, and one reason I specifically took this picture is because you will see this. You'll actually probably see it upside down because your transducer will probably be about here, and you might be looking up, and you will see the structure. And if you don't know what it is, you might call it a tumor, and then everyone laughs at you. So that is a cross section of the penis. We'll just quickly say urethra and spongy layer basically are here. And then this is the, let's see, what do we call it, corpus. Cavernous. We talked about this later on, so we don't really have to go into this any kind of detail here, but just know that when you're doing a testicular exam, this guy is in there. He's in there in between. And if sometimes let's say blood is engorged in the area, which is a little embarrassing for the guy, I would imagine, then it really stands out. And I knew a tech who measured it and kept on going back to it. And the doctors had a pretty good laugh about that. Let's see. Oh, you can see the cremaster muscle coming down here. There's a scrotal septa. So there's two scrotal sacs. Testicle, the right and left testicles cannot cross into the other side. There is a septa in between. On the outside, you could actually see that as a darker line as the media raphe. Yeah, raphe, media raphe. I knew. R-A-P-H-A-E, raphe, media raphe. Cremaster muscle, septum, corpus. Erase 2 layers of spermatic. Okay, cool. That's pretty much all I wanted to include on that. And we'll talk about these vessels in a second. Let's talk about the vessels when we come back. But first, we'll give you Seriously? You know what? I'm going to throw a couple more pictures on here. So I want to be able to show you the ultrasound equivalent of everything we're talking about. And I'm actually missing a few. So let's go ahead and take a break. Let's see. All right, we're going to plow through a little bit more. I forgot. We're gonna pick this up again tomorrow. I forgot. We're already at 2 o'clock. I'm 3 o'clock now. All right, we'll get into veins and arteries tomorrow. I know I've thrown a lot at you, and I was okay. Shoot. Well, you know what? That actually, I kept on missing that image. It's pretty decent. So mediastinum testis is right here. Now, this has a really different appearance on different men. It could really vary, but that's a pretty common appearance to it. On this one, you could actually see the reedy testis inside of it. And so all these little tiny tubules, that's the reedy testis sitting inside the structure of the mediastinum. Remember, the mediastinum is a part of the outside of the testicle, the tunica albuginea. This happens to be the head. This happens to be the head up here of the epididymis. Scrotum skin. We always pay attention to that as well. Of course, if there's a problem, we probably see it with our own eyes. Here is some mild ectasia of the reedy testis. So on this person, you're actually going to have a hard time seeing the mediastinum because this is pretty well filled out. It's normally not this big. Not a big deal though. This isn't going to kill the guy. It probably doesn't. I'm sure he doesn't feel anything. So that is ectasia of the reedy testis. That is a more or less transverse view. And here's a pretty dramatic ectasia of the reedy testis. That's an eye catcher. You know, you don't see this every day, but that's a sagittal, basically a sagittal view of the testicle. And here we get a little bit of the head of the epididymis, and you see how that is basically isoechoic to the testicle. It's isoechoic to the testicle, whereas this is the body down here. Now this body is pretty typical, although maybe just slightly ectatic, because you could really see the tubules inside of this, but it's pretty close to normal. So I'm probably not going to call that on anything if I see it. It's on the posterior, usually on the posterior surface. The testicle can be rotated a little bit right or left, so sometimes you're off to the side looking for this. According to the book, 2 to 4 millimeters. So almost half a centimeter is normal on that. And then the tail is not seen. Tail is going to be like over here on this person. Let's see. Otherwise, that's a pretty normal testicle. Tunica albuginea. It's going along right there. That's the tunica albuginea. I was going to tell you guys a story, and I put this in there. I might have alluded to it before, but it wasn't really. I'll tell you the story tomorrow. Um, here's the twins. This is my first picture. First picture is the twins. Those are pretty normal looking, normal skin. This person actually did a panoramic, which is pretty unusual. Next thing I do is color in the same place. This person's got more color on one side than the other. That's a problem. He's probably hurting. On this picture, normal testicle, but it's a pretty high resolution. Well, let's see, normal, tiny amount of fluid, but it's so little that probably not even mentioned. Oh, see a little bit of the tail here of the epididymis. And what these guys are pointing to, supposedly, and I guess so, I would love to see color on this, but these are the septa. Normally we don't see the septa, and so I guess maybe that's why I don't really recognize it as septa. And it kind of makes sense, but I would almost want to see and make sure that those aren't blood vessels themselves, but those are supposedly septa. That was for tunica albuginea again, going around the outside. This is a really nice, perfect picture of, actually, this is actually really cool. So when we measure the head of the epididymis, typically it's like one measurement goes across this way, another one kind of goes across, maybe not straight up and down, because you could see where you could really exaggerate if you measured like that. And so that's, most people don't do that, but probably more or less like that. But look at here, you could actually see the difference between truly what's the head, and then look at the difference. Yeah, you have this here. And so I believe, technically speaking, this is the head and this is body. You wouldn't be faulted, no one would ever fault you though for measuring across, because this is unusual that we actually see a clear delineation between those two layers right there. But clearly this is body down here, pretty much isoechoic, slightly hypoechoic, just like our notes say, isoechoic to slightly hypoechoic, whereas the head is isoechoic to slightly hyperechoic, so could have been just a little bit brighter than the testicle itself. And then, we'll talk about that. Talk about that another time. Okay. All right, let me stop